following program was a production of the Fairfax Network, Fairfax County Public Schools.
This program was made possible through generous support from the Donald W. Reynolds Foundation to George Washington's Mount Vernon Estate, Museum, and Gardens. I Ain't No Three-Fifths of a Person, Slavery and the Constitution is a co-production of the Fairfax Network and George Washington's Mount Vernon Estate, Museum, and Gardens.
By 1787, it was obvious that the Confederation government was not working. The new United States was on the verge of bankruptcy, and cooperation between the states was declining. That summer, representatives from 12 states met in Philadelphia to restructure the Articles of Confederation government.
We would all like to think that the men who created our government all wore white hats, that they were 21st century people and they knew slavery was wrong and they wanted to get rid of it. It's not the case. When they do discuss slavery at the convention, it is not about the slaves themselves. Nobody wants to talk about the inhumanity of slavery. Nobody talks about how slaves are really people. It was an issue in terms of representation. Were slaves going to be counted when you based the House of Representatives on population? And it was an issue in terms of importation of slaves. No one raised the issue of the importation of more people stolen from their homeland in Africa was evil. That was not the issue. The issue was purely political. These men truly thought that their country was about to disappear. They thought it would be divided up between France, England, and Spain because America had no military protection. Or they thought that it would implode because the states had gone back to their old colonial pattern of battling each other. They really believed 1783, they become truly an independent country. 1787, they think the whole thing is going down the drain. So for them, the key issue was how to produce a government that would save the country. Slavery was not the most important issue for them, and they made that really very clear. So I think if we want to look for a high-minded discussion of the morality of slavery, we cannot look to the convention.
The result of the convention was the Constitution, a blueprint for a new government. A government created through a series of political compromises that gave everyone something they wanted, and no one everything they wanted. For the enslaved population, it meant they remained property and counted at a reduced rate for representation. The word slave does not appear anywhere in the Constitution. The social aspects of colonial society were complicated by the complexity of relationships between the masters and the enslaved. Slaves, such as Bob Hemmings and Billy Lee, had unique relationships with their masters that are difficult for us to imagine in the 21st century.
Sir, I understand James enjoyed Paris?
Oh, your brother James Hemmings loved Paris, as I came to love it after 5 years. I have never seen him more ardent over a people or their arts in any other situation, particularly here in our own vicinage, as he was those 5 years in France, particularly excelling at French cuisine and particularly as well loving French wine, to which I have become accustomed.
Professor James also said that the Frenchmen, the Papists, Catholic men, they think akin to the northern men about the business of slaving and all.
Oh, yes, your brother is correct. The French have a distaste for it. They have never engaged themselves in the commerce of slavery, and they have neglected it on their books of law.
We are home, sir.
We are home, Billy. Thank you. Thank you sincerely. Put these away, please, and go see your brother Frank.
I will, sir. Thank you, sir. Will we ride out to the farms tomorrow, sir? General George Washington and Billy Lee had quite a special relationship. General Washington purchased Billy Lee and his brother Frank from Westmoreland County. And William Lee, or Billy as he's known, became his manservant, while his brother Frank became the butler. And as the manservant, that meant that Billy would be the one to accompany General Washington wherever he went. He accompanied him out in the fields in the morning to ride out and inspect his farms. He dressed him, carried his paper, packed his portmanteau. When he went to Williamsburg as a Burgesses, Billy Lee was there as well. He traveled as a delegate to the conventions. Billy Lee was always at his side, and even when he was a general, there was his personal valet, his manservant, Billy Lee.
During the Constitutional Convention, he's with George Washington in Philadelphia, and I can't imagine that there weren't instances where maybe he wouldn't say, well, what's a constitution, or something like that, and the two would be talking, or I heard someone mention such and such a thing, and what does that mean, or what's happening? The other thing to keep in mind is that Billy, like many personal servants, would have been very, often in the room doing things when conversations were going on. He would have been there probably helping serve at the table during meals. So he would have been there and people would have been talking. So he would have known what was going on.
As a black or white person, Billy Lee is in a very unique position. I mean, this is an opportunity to be in the room where they're discussing the formation of the government. This is when they're talking about and planning strategy during the Revolution, how it should be carried out. He's there. Yes, sir, General Washington.
Billy, I need you to post this to Mr. James McHenry immediately on the morrow.
Is this the letter we spoke of earlier?
It is. I finally got around to writing it. We had this Annapolis convention. I did not attend, but Colonel Hamilton reported to me along with a few others.
I think George Washington had strong relationships with a lot of people over the course of his life, especially those who served with him during the war. His officers, folks like Hamilton, Henry Knox that he served with, they just occupied a place in his life that nobody else was going to occupy. And the same, I think, goes for Billy Lee, who was his personal slave, served with him through 8 years of war. Obviously served in a relationship that was very different from the one that he had with Alexander Hamilton or Henry Knox, but nevertheless an important one. And just having gone through that experience, I think meant that relationship was going to be a very special one for Washington.
But sir, will we be able to head down there and into the fray?
Billy, I have no idea. I'm not a soothsayer. I'm not a prognosticator. It is a complete unknown at this juncture.
But what does the discussion mean for us, General? Will we be back in action again, sir?
Billy, I need to read Mr. Madison's letter first. That way I will have a timely response and be able to convey this to you. It will, I can tell you, mean nothing less than the entire future of this nation.
What's very interesting about Billy Lee as being an enslaved person in this environment is that he then must leave that environment and come back to socialize and interact with the enslaved community. So what he has garnered and learned through those experiences, he's going to come back and share.
It is passed. It is ratified with great help from the governor, Randolph.
General, is that the all of it, sir?
We are now a country with a constitution. And now the work begins. We need to form a government.
And those same discussions that are taking place in households throughout America at the time that the Constitution has been ratified will be taking place in the enslaved community. And who will be there to tell them and to explain the process and to weigh in? None other than Billy Lee, the person who was right there.
What is Billy up to?
I don't know. He's been bouncing around all night. You know, Caroline? No.
You know something had to be on his mind.
Something's always on that man's mind.
I wonder if there's any kind of news.
I don't know. What about it?
I have been trying to get in here to speak with y'all all evening long. Boy, it sure is hot in here, Miss Monk. Well, look here. I just put the general down. Well, he ain't sleeping, I should say. You know, he's still in his office. But he shared with me some special news. That these United States of America have ratified a new Constitution. I'm telling you, the government in this here document is laid out sure as it's fine. It's got a House side, a Senate side. It's got an executive branch where somebody's going to be heading in charge. And if you ask me, they're going to ask the general. That means we'll be going to New York in no time. I sure miss New York. You know, when them British routed us out.
Billy, ratification? What did that mean?
Ratification is the process where all the states vote upon making a new government. And they've all said yes, so it's been ratified. Like I said, we're going to go to New York, and I'm telling you, when I get to New York, I'm going to walk.
But Billy, what does this have to do with us?
Well, I believe the document says something about Negroes being 3/5, but see...
3/5 of what? 3/5 of the United States?
Oh, no. What it says is that we's part of the whole population of the United States. You see, the document gives any man any right who's born here to move around any place they want to move around to. So Negroes are 3/5 of the population. No, I think it's 3/5 of a person. Negroes are 3/5 of a person.
Billy, I am no 3/5 of a person. I'm a whole person. Just like anyone else is a whole person.
Oh, look, don't get all hung up on that. You got to understand what this new Constitution means. This new Constitution means for us that freedom is in reach. It's in grasp now.
Mr. Lee, does this new document make us free or not?
No, it doesn't make us free. It doesn't end slavery, nothing like that.
And I don't know what you're talking about. You said it gives us freedom. Does it give us freedom or not?
Listen at me now. This document gives us a vision for freedom. It says, we the people, in order to form a more perfect union, do ordain, establish tranquility, peace, and justice, and such and so forth. So it lays the framework for freedom.
It lays the framework, Billy, but why do we have to wait to get our freedom?
Now, you listen at me. When we was fighting in the War of Independence, there was colored Negro patriots, there was white patriots and Indian patriots. Now, we didn't have no guarantees of freedom, but we fought just the same.
Well, it seems to me, Mr. Lee, that when you were fighting in that war, they didn't count you as 3/5 of a soldier.
Nobody counts 3/5 of a soldier because all you worried about is a man can level a musket at what's coming at us.
So now that the war is over, you're not a whole man?
Well, sure, I'm a whole man, but you gotta have vision. See, I'm not talking kind of vision you see right before you.
I think my vision is quite good.
No, but I'm talking about a long-term vision.
Billy, your horse is no 3/5 of a horse. Your horse is a whole horse.
Oh, now
I'm a whole person.
Well, listen at me, Christopher. What I'm saying is, this new government of ours, it allows you to be able to worship the way you want to worship. It forms a navy and forms a military. It does everything that a great nation will need, and we are part of that great nation.
Billy, these gentlemen are getting their freedom now. Why do we have to wait?
Yeah, a white working woman only works 7 years and then she's free. I've been working since I was 10 years old and I'm still a slave.
Now listen at me. You see, I listen. When I'm standing there waiting on the general, I hear the Marquis de Lafayette talking with him, prodding him, nudging him. And I hear the Marquis say to him, Mon General, we should free our Negroes and provide a place for them. You trust me, as sure as a hog love corn, General Washington gonna do right by us.
Now, wait a minute, Billy. Not only do we have to wait to get our freedom, Lord knows when, we got to go elsewhere to get it? That ain't right. This is our home.
This ain't no home when you figure it. Because I sure would rather be a slave if I had to be a slave in New York, where in the evening time when I finish my supper and I want to stroll the pave, I can take a stroll. If I want to put on my finest and head down to the Bowery to get myself a dram, I can do it. Not here at Mount Vernon.
We'll still be slaves in New York, though, won't we?
A slave better in New York than Mount Vernon.
Well, what about your wife?
One day you'll get married. And you understand that wherever your wife is with you, that's freedom. For me, that's either here or in New York.
Well, I hope you're right, Mr. Lee. As far as I'm concerned, I don't see it.
Me either.
Well, you all sure know how to make a man sit him on his way.
I told you he was up to something. I told you.
I know it.
Running around talking about all. He don't even see things.
The 3/5 compromise in the Constitution does not really say that slaves are 3/5 of a person. The actual language says that for the purposes of representation, every 5 slaves will be counted as 3 people. And interestingly, the idea of a 3/5 modifier was not new.
The Articles of Confederation government had already come up with this formula, because that's really what it is. It's a formula. It's an absurd compromise. I mean, all of us know that 5 people can't become 3 people. The 3/5 compromise was originally proposed by the Confederation because they were trying to figure out how much money each state was obliged to pay to support the Confederation government. The South didn't want the 3/5 compromise. They didn't want their slaves to count as any number of people, because then the requisition figure for their states would be low. The North wanted the 3/5 compromise, because then Southerners would have to pay more money to support the government. So in the Confederation era, the North was for the 3/5 compromise and the South was against it. Now you get to the convention, and it's not about paying money to support the government. It's about how many representatives will you have in the House of Representatives. Complete switch. The South insists on the 3/5 compromise. We want our slaves counted as people. And the North argues, no, they're property. They shouldn't be counted as people. What this tells you once again is the slaves are not the issue.
Regardless of the formula for legal representation, members of the enslaved community continued living in their society within a society, a unique social structure with its own traditions and values that had developed over the course of more than 100 years of enslavement.
Within the enslaved community, there is a hierarchy that's being seen. Of course, the hierarchy is different when you look, depending on whose perspective you're looking from. Looking from Bob's perspective, I think, Bob sees himself as being at the top of the hierarchy.
I think Billy Lee has a wonderful and a very much elevated, one might say an elite position among the enslaved community here.
From the perspective of the Washingtons, Billy and Oney and the other house servants definitely were considered sort of higher level servant. The jobs were seen as easier in many ways than field work. Being in the house was something that was held out to other people as maybe something to work up to.
There would also be a lot of respect, reverence for, say, somebody who is older, who has been on this farm, been on this property before a lot of these younger individuals. They can tell them about family members that maybe they never knew. So there's that reverence there for somebody who's an elder in the community as well.
He may not be as old as some of those old Africans who live here, who have that connection to the continent, but he has a worldview and a set of experience that places him and elevates him above many others. That he has the general's ear, that he has the ear of so many others.
The servants who worked most closely with the Washingtons were an important source of information for the enslaved community as a whole.
Oney or any one of the enslaved individuals owned by the Washingtons who are working close to them or close to the house are going to be in a position to hear news that is coming in from around the state, from around the country at this point.
If Mrs. Washington and General Washington were reading the Gazette or some other publication or a book and they were reading to each other, she could hear that because she would be in the room serving them.
You're always going to be within eyeshot, and you're always going to be within earshot of your master and mistress and of their guests. And I think today we discount the power of the spoken word and how news passes very quickly from one person to another.
She could also hear at the table when she was serving meals. She was a parlor maid in that way. She served meals, and she was in there when the gentlemen were playing parlor games. And so she would definitely be able to hear, important news.
About 20% is the estimate of the number of African Americans who could read in the 18th century. And so people who could read, if you were dusting a table and there was a letter on it, you might be able to find things out that way. If there were newspapers laying around, you could find out information about what was going on in the bigger world off the plantation through those.
And it was very known that once news was within the enslaved community, not just say on a certain property like Mount Vernon, but once it was in the general slave community, that it passes very quickly, because as guests are coming to Mount Vernon, they may be bringing their maidservant or manservant, their footman or coachman. When they leave Mount Vernon, they're going to carry news to their home property, and so on and so forth.
In 1791, a slave revolt began in the country we now call Haiti. It was a French colony at the time, a sugar producer, a big coffee producer, and the population of the island was about 90% African-born slaves, and the other 10% were made up of a French white ruling class and sort of a mid-level of mulatto, free black people. The revolt started in 1791, sort of inspired by both the American Revolution and the French Revolution, which had been going on then for about 2 years. And the revolt lasted until about 1804, so it went on for a long time.
Almost everyone in America would know about this, and mainly from the standpoint the refugee ships that are leaving Haiti, and they are going in every port, every major port, Charleston, South Carolina, in Norfolk, Virginia, in Philadelphia, in New York. These refugee ships are mooring into these places, and aboard that ship are French refugees with their enslaved people, and so it will start to affect every city.
People are hearing horrible stories. They can see what this has done to these people, and especially in the South, slave owners are getting very anxious.
And sometimes it's not even a rebellion itself, it's a threat of rebellion. These things are passing like wildfire, because in some cases, some of the folks that are involved are traveling and passing this news on to other people.
Joe, well, where the tobacco at?
Well, I figured you was gonna bring the tobacco.
Oh, she did not tell you that?
Why you figure that, Joe? Cause he's the one that hangs out with the people and stuff. I was a field hand.
Oh, Joe, well, you close to the back then.
I guess you got a point
Y'all look
there.
who's
I
here.
can't say nothing about that. Oh, my Lord. Look at here.
You got him and
Lordy, Lordy.
what are you doing here, Bob? What you saying?
Bob. How you find your way to my place? What you doing here, boy?
Mr. Jefferson wanted to come see y'all's Mr. Washington and ask him to take a second term.
Oh,
Second term, huh?
Yeah, I don't think the general wants to take a second term.
Well, I know Mrs. Washington doesn't want him to.
Yeah, I don't know. He do what he want to do most times. That's the way the general is.
That's right.
Well, when you president, all kinds of folks come and see you. Why? I'm sure you got all kinds of folks still coming to see you.
Billy, some men came to see the general just the other day. They call themselves abolitionists. Yeah. They say that this person in Philadelphia called Thomas Paine sent them. And you know what they said?
What they said?
They said that they're going to free all the Negroes. Yeah, that's the way it's going to come. It's going to come through their freedom, through their work.
During the war, we met some abolitionists in Massachusetts and also in New Jersey. And them abolitionists, well, they got a plan for freeing the Negroes.
Billy, I'm with you. I think this is the way that we're going to get our freedom. Let them abolitionists work their magic. You're going to see what's going to happen.
I don't mean no harm,
Mm-hmm. Here we go now.
But if there's freedom to be had, I don't think the abolition men is the men who's going to do it.
What do you think?
Well, me, I think there's that land out to the west, the Northwest Territory, where they say that that folks who can settle there will be no slaves in there. And in order to get out there, well, certainly we could join with some of the Indians out there.
Indians? Don't touch. And what kind of Indians are you talking about anyway?
I don't know which Indians is out there, but I'm sure it's some out there that's going to be friendly to
there's
the
some
freedom.
Indians out there. There's some Indians out there.
Which Indians are you talking
I'm talking about any of them. There's freedom out there.
Well, they ain't all the same.
That's right.
Just like we ain't all the same. That's true.
Well, what other choice is there? I mean, what? Sit around here and wait for your Mr. Washington to give y'all freedom? Is that what y'all think?
Now listen at me now. I done heard General Washington speak with young Marquis de Lafayette plenty of times about a scheme that the Marquis had. He had a scheme that all the Negroes could be free and sent down to their own country in a place in South America.
I like that.
Not out west with the Indians.
I like that.
I think y'all have your mind set on the wrong Frenchman.
Huh?
Y'all need to think about that Toussaint down in Saint Domingue.
I heard about
Toussaint?
Negro Frenchman down there.
No.
But see, what he is doing is he's getting Negroes to fight for their freedom. They ain't sitting around waiting for some white man to give it to them.
Fighting for it themselves.
They're fighting for it for themselves.
Wait. But this Toussaint fella, what you saying here? He gonna come here and he gonna make all us free?
I don't know.
He's like Moses or something.
Now wait a minute.
Don't y'all make no fun of
Oney.
scripture.
Now what I did here though, I heard about what happened to Toussaint's men. I heard them Frenchmen, when they catch hold of them, they sticks a gibbet in their side and hang them up.
What's a gibbet?
Well, they stick a hook in your side.
Oh, Lord.
And raise you up until you die of thirst.
Lord.
I don't want none of that.
But, Billy, they're doing it for themselves is what I'm saying. They aren't waiting for somebody to give them freedom later on or after their freedom is secured. They're doing something about it themselves.
And if that Toussaint is courageous enough to go against Napoleon and the French, what about us?
You know, you might be on to something there. In the late war, the gentlemen, they gathered together. They fight against the British for their freedom, their independence. But they didn't just do that. Of course not. You place a petition. You put in this petition what your grievances are.
That's 10 years.
You tell them what it is that you want. Allow them to understand what your demands are, and you take that up to the General
That's
Assembly.
20 years.
Yeah, we demand our freedom. We demand freedom for all.
30 years, 40 years, we dead.
Well, maybe it's for our children.
I got
Did you ever think about that?
That's right, for the children.
This Constitution that give us this new nation, it says in its words that it's been ordained for ourselves and our posterity. Now, that's our children, ain't it?
Yeah, but see, it also says we the people, we ain't people, we're property.
Well, look. The Bible says this. The Bible says weeping is but for a moment, but joy cometh in the morning.
Cometh in the morning.
When freedom cometh be morning time.
That boy know his scripture.
Well, we've been waiting for that morning for a long
Been
time.
night time.
I tell you that.
Well, listen, y'all. Maybe it don't got to be no big rebellion. Maybe it can be one man and one woman rebelling on their own.
What do you mean?
Caroline, I ain't gonna say no more than that, but you know what I mean.
We all know what she means.
Gotta do it.
Buzzards flying high tonight.
What did happen, Lord? Look at that buzz.
Oh,
goodness.
Billy, Christopher Sheels. Overseer Pierce?
Yeah, the general's going to want to leave early tomorrow, so you best make sure that those horses are ready.
I'll be there right away, sir. Take care of it, sir.
Yeah, you better get up to those stables. I don't want you keeping the general waiting now.
I'm right on your heels, sir. Right on your heels.
All right. Oh, and Christopher.
Sir?
Get any letters lately? Oh, and Christopher, runaway is spelled with one in.
What's that all about? What are you talking about?
Is there something you want to tell us, Christopher?
I ain't got nothing to say.
Slavery certainly was a topic that Washington wrestled with, his entire career. And again, as a young man, is a slaveholder and by all accounts has no compunctions whatsoever. He has, all sorts of experiences dealing with slavery. And we can trace in his personal writings, I think it's very clear that from the 1770s on, his attitude, changes. And by 1780s, he's on record hoping that slavery will be abolished.
I believe that Billy Lee had an idea that he would really be free one day, that he would receive that ultimately freedom no longer to be property. I think the rhetoric of the American Revolution, the founding principles of America, I think Billy Lee had a real understanding of those. But more importantly, he had an understanding of General Washington. And for any astute scholar, you can see that General Washington, throughout his life, his views, opinions, and beliefs changed. They ebb and flow and sort of evolve. And he had this evolving opinion about slavery. And through that relationship, I'm pretty confident that Billy Lee knew that General Washington would do the right thing as the father of liberty and the founder of this great nation.
He does everything he can, and I think, again, unlike some of the other founding fathers, we know from his records that he actually tries to set about raising the money to be able to pay to free the Custis slaves. He didn't own them. They were dower slaves from Martha Washington's first husband's estate, so he couldn't just free them. He would have actually had to pay the estate for their value. And in the 1790s, he tries to do that. It's only after he fails, because he can't sell his properties to get the money that he wants, that he's left to come up with the best decision that he could make, which is that he could free only his slaves and free them in his will.
Washington's will provided for his slaves to be freed after his and Martha's death. Mrs. Washington, however, decided to speed this up, freeing George Washington's slaves on January 1st, 1801. Her own slaves remained property, and on her death in 1802, ownership passed to her descendants, along with the rest of her estate. In 1865, with the ratification of the 13th Amendment, slavery was abolished in the United States. As Mount Vernon slaves Billy and Caroline had envisioned, their children, grandchildren, and their posterity would never again be the property of another.
Here's what's wonderful about the Constitution. It didn't create democracy, and it didn't create equality, but it left room for them to rise up within that political framework. And one of the ways it left room was the amendment process. The men who wrote the Constitution were not originalists. They said, we don't know what's going to happen in the next generation or the next generation. We don't know what they'll need. We don't know what they'll want. So let's make the Constitution changeable. Let's make it organic. Let's make it adapt as the needs of the country adapt. I always think about the framers of the Constitution arriving in New York City and seeing women voting. They would have died if they weren't already dead. They would have been apoplectic. Their heads would have exploded. Except Gouverneur Morris, who might have said, that's interesting. Or Ben Franklin, who might have said, that's interesting. And yet, they would have said, if that's what this generation believes in, if that's what they need, if that's what they want, then the amendment that gave women the vote is okay with us. So when people today say, oh, let's go back and see what the men who wrote the Constitution said about this, that's the wrong approach. The right approach is, let's be thankful that they created a document that could adapt to the needs of the next century and the next century.